My name is Michael Mahoney. I'm the Director of the Archdiocese of Vancouver. And a couple of quick guidelines for this evening. We really appreciate everyone being here and joining us. So we're going to try to keep the speakers to around an hour and a little bit. And then hopefully we'll have time to open up for some questions and answers at the end. We encourage you to take notes throughout. You can also use the prompter to ask questions at any point. You can direct message our speakers. We will record these sessions, so we ultimately can get back to you all if we don't get to it this evening. As well, I believe you all have the bios of our great speakers here tonight too, so you can connect with myself or any one of us to facilitate a future meeting or a one-on-one session. So keep your questions to the end. We will also be sending out a follow-up survey, and Peter and Joe will speak to a couple of promotional opportunities as well. So we will get right into it this evening. So first up, from Mountain Strong Financial, I'd like to introduce Joe Vanderburst to get things started. Joe, welcome and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Just get my thing here. All right, and I trust everybody can see my slides okay? All right, so thank you, Michael. I am Joe Vanderbush from St. Anne's Parish in Abbotsford. I've been active in our Catholic community as a volunteer for over the last 20 years, with time spent in our Catholic schools, on parish council, and the parish finance committees. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus and the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre, where I give back over the years where I can. And as an advisor, I've been working for over 27 years in the financial and estate planning field. I have many financial designations which are meant to help provide the resources we will need when we work together to build your plans. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Maureen, and I have 2 adult children, Jordan and Kirsten, and we all live in Abbotsford. It is important to understand what I am and what I am not, since tonight we will be discussing many things, which include legal issues and estate laws. However, I'm not a lawyer. We will be discussing many things that deal with taxes and accounting. However, I'm not an accountant. What I am is an estate and financial planner. So before we would implement any strategies with you, we would consult these professionals to make sure everything goes as planned. So what is the job of a financial and estate planner? In a nutshell, it's this. Here we have a beautiful day. When we talk, I want you to share your vision. Share what you believe your beautiful day looks like to you. My job is to listen. Pay attention to the details of your picture. Not to try to change it, but to help you become aware of anything which might wreck your picture. This one little detail can wreck your beautiful day. On this beautiful day, my family was enjoying some pierogies on the pier at Granville Island, and we wanted to capture the view of the city landscape. Minutes later, we saw a splash in the water, and rescue boats came rushing to the scene as the man on the bridge had jumped in. It was later that evening, when looking over our family photos, that we saw the silhouette of the man moments before he jumped. We still talk about this day over 10 years later. So how does this help you? Well, when I meet with clients, they share their picture. Sometimes it looks like the guy on the left. In order to help you, first we need to make sense of what we're looking at. As I understand your picture, we get organized. And with this, we can help you plan. So this can seem daunting at first, but do the easy stuff first. Pull together your papers, your current will, your power of attorney, your advanced directives, your most recent tax returns, insurance policies, investment certificates, and so on. Then set some time aside and review everything with a professional advisor and get a clear understanding of where you are. Our goal is to help you achieve yours. It's not to tell you how you should live your life, but to help you give you a plan so you can. Why plan? Why have a will? Why give money to charity? Why leave anything for your loved ones? You have to understand your why. Then you need to share it with your advisor. The better I understand what you want, the easier it'll be for me to help build your plan. If you have a guy standing on a bridge, I can point it out to you and we can decide what we want to do. This is your plan, it's not mine. So it's important it does what you want it to do. Once we have a plan, we need to build it. And that can involve lawyers and accountants and licensed insurance and investment advisors, funeral directors, banks, the list goes on. We help you with this, using the Archdiocese Allied Professional Network, helping you deal with a Catholic resource as much as possible. With the plan built, you can rest easy knowing your annual reviews with your advisor will catch any changes the government dreams up, and know that if anything dramatic changes in your life, which might change the plan, your advisor is only an email or a phone call away. It's important to surround ourselves with good people in our personal life. The same thing is true about our financial life. It's important to surround yourself with good people. And when it comes to your financial and estate planning, it is also important to make sure these people are properly qualified to assist you. When we go to the doctor, their certificates are on the wall, and they are recognized by a governing body. With this knowledge, we comfortably sit down with our family doctor and share our story, knowing that they will do their educated best to help us. This is no different in the financial and estate planning world. If you don't see their certificates, ask them about their education. Unfortunately, at this point, there is no requirement for a financial planner in British Columbia to have any education. Someone can just offer their services, so be sure to ask. I recommend you try and work with somebody who is at least a certified financial planner. This means they're educated. They have a governing body you can go to with your concerns. Your advisor needs to also carry errors and omissions insurance. This protects you and him from any mistakes which may be made. Many industries make it a mandatory requirement. This is typical when you're dealing with lawyers, accountants, insurance, and investment advisors. However, unregulated financial advisors may not carry any protection for you, so you need to be sure to ask. As a certified financial planner, when I do estate planning, I like to start with the end in mind. Let's review your will. And if you don't have one, let's get one written. So what is a will? A will is a simple set of instructions of what you would want to have happen with all your worldly possessions. You name an executor in your will to carry out your wishes. I recommend doing your will through a lawyer who specializes in wills and estates, and we can provide you with the name of a Catholic lawyer near you who is part of the Archdiocese group of allied professionals. Their guidance will help avoid potential challenges. You could, however, choose to skip the lawyer and do it yourself. Do-it-yourself will kits, where you get them off the internet or through a local bookstore. If they're done properly, witnessed by two individuals, ideally not the beneficiaries, it will likely be valid from a legal standpoint. However, most people lack the necessary legal knowledge to do a good job. They often fail to meet the objectives of the person the will is for. These mistakes in the will can complicate the management of the estate and ultimately delay the distribution of assets because they fail to provide the executor with the proper instructions and authority. Over 75% of Canadians over the age of 65 do not have a current will in place. Without a will, your estate proceeds will be distributed based on the current intestate laws for British Columbia. Currently, these laws will leave no money or assets to the charities which you support. Having a will is the easiest and first item to be addressed when you want to ensure your affairs are handled as you would want them to be, and not how the government would like to see. So I have good news and bad news. The good news is we all have a will. The bad news is if you did not write it, the government did. Now, how could that be a bad thing? The disadvantages of dying intestate is there is no executor appointed. So someone or some regulatory body will have to step in. This is typically the public guardian and trustee. Because nothing is laid out, time may be a challenge as potential family members try to figure out what you would have wanted. Not to mention maybe what to do with your new puppy. Maybe one of the family members will apply to be responsible and take on the role as the administrator. But then they'll have to post a bond and they'll have to do all the work without any guidance beyond the intestate guidelines. The cost for this process can be significant. If the estate is of any size, and most estates in BC, if they involve a home, are easily over $1 million. For example, the public guardian trustee will charge their full fees, which can be up to 7% for some assets. It would not take long for the cost of settling the estate to be over $50,000. When we die, our assets are broken into two classes. It's the same whether we have a will or we don't. First is the probated assets. These are the things you own all by yourself, a bank account or maybe a car. Other things would be, the other assets are what they call the non-probated assets. These are things like life insurance or segregated funds where you name a beneficiary, or perhaps something that you hold jointly with your spouse, such as the family home or a joint bank account. The focus of your estate will be on your probated assets, since they move through your estate and they're subject to your will or the rules laid out by the government. So what happens with the probated assets when you do not have a will? If you have an investment account, for example, which is in your name alone, say it has $1 million in it. In this example, the first $300,000 would go to your spouse, and then the remainder would be split 50-50 between your spouse and your children. For the kids, the money may be required to be held in trust by the provincial trustee if they're minors. Speaking of kids, if you have children and something happened to both parents, the courts will decide who gets guardianship over the children. This can get messy, or worse, the kids could end up in the system. If you have kids, have a will, ideally with a trust to hold their money in the event that something happens to both of you. This is where we would use a lawyer. But what if you don't have a spouse or any children? Being intestate, your estate would go to your parents if they're around. Otherwise, it would go to your siblings. And if you have no siblings, it would go to your nieces and nephews, or to your cousins, first, second, or third. And if you're all alone, then it goes to the government, not to your favorite charity or a friend. If you have a will, well, things are a little different. Namely, you select the executor and how much they can charge the estate for managing the affairs. And you decide how your probated assets are to be handled. If you are named as the executor, the will is the document which puts you to work. It will guide you through dealing with the assets of the estate, namely, again, the probated assets. Speaking about executors, imagine with me, you're at your best friend's place and he asks you if you'll be his executor. Wow, what an honor. You immediately say, well, absolutely, buddy. The evening goes on and you don't give it much thought. And you get home and you tell your wife and she says, honey, what does that mean? Well, you spend the next few hours trying to figure it out. What did you agree to? How long will it take? What challenges should you be aware of as the executor? Can I be personally sued by the family? What if I change my mind? Should I be calling my buddy and backing out? Let's first understand what you're taking on. It's important as the executor to get help if you need it. As an executor, you are bound by fiduciary duty, which means you must always act in good faith and with loyalty, and you must act in the best interest of the beneficiaries and carry out the instructions of the person who made the will. So if you agreed and poof, your friend is gone, well, now you're the executor. After the funeral, but before initiating administration, I want you to stop. This really should be done also before you agreed to be the executor, but it's important to do again before initiating administration. Assess the complexity and time commitment of acting as an executor before proceeding. Executors have the right to refuse, and the alternative is named, would take over, or someone else would apply for the role. Alternatively, consider hiring a corporate executor or trustee service, as they have the experience, time, impartiality, and competence to administer even the most complex estates. If proceeding, executors should assess their own personal risk. Use the estate risk profile to determine this, and consider obtaining executor insurance to protect yourself and your families. You're welcome to drop me an email and I'd happily send you out the estate risk profile. So being the executor, no big deal. It's simple, right? Well, we have a document which will walk you through the steps. And if we had an extra 30 minutes or so, I could, go through it with you tonight. But rather than that, you can just request it and I can send it out to you. And then if you have any questions, happy to help you. But here it is. Here's the job in a nutshell. The person who made the will dies. And as the executor, you're responsible for the safeguarding of the properties left behind, paying for the funeral, locating all the property known as the assets of the estate, paying off any debts and all their taxes, and distributing what is remaining to the beneficiary named in the will, all while making sure to adhere to your responsibility of fiduciary duty. If you need help through this process, there's people like myself that are available to answer questions and provide guidance. The job is very important because if you make a mistake and you forget perhaps to pay a bill and you settle the entire estate, you could become personally liable for that bill. Have you ever heard the phrase, we are stewards of the gifts God has given to us? As good stewards, we make the most with these gifts. Hopefully, we build them up and pass them on. We pass on these gifts in many ways. One way is through the distribution of our money through taxes. If you think of your tax dollar being your contribution to society, these dollars become your social dollars. By paying tax, we give these social dollars to the government. Then they very carefully distribute our money back into society to help those less fortunate, build roads and support our hospitals and so on. But what if you decided you could do better with the money you have built up? You could redirect these social dollars to things which matter to you. You might even be able to better manage these decisions than the government. You could still support the hospitals, but you could also support the poor or the elderly, the young, your parish, or any other things that matter to you. To illustrate some of these things, which can be done with estate planning, I'm going to use charitable gifting strategies as an example of how proper planning can have a dramatic impact. How we give matters in financial planning. John and Jill share that they'd like to give their local parish one of their investments. They have a non-registered stock portfolio, which has done really well. Their initial investment has grown from $10,000 to $40,000 in the last number of years. And knowing they can donate this money and help out their parish today, while at the same time being able to save some money on taxes, really appeals to them. Well, they have a couple options when they donate this money. Option A, they can just contact their advisor, cash out the investment and put it into their bank and write a check. Option B, they can contact their advisor, have the investment transferred to the Archdiocese for use by the parish. In both cases, the parish will end up receiving the $40,000. In both cases, the givers will receive a tax receipt for the full value of the gift and receive a tax credit of $17,433 to apply against their tax bill this year. So why does it matter how they do it? Well, under option A, it'll trigger a T3 from the investment firm to account for the money that they made on their investment since they owned it when it was cashed out. And the government wants tax on the money that they made. The government will add half of the $30,000 they made to their taxable income for the year. In our example, the givers would need to pay an additional $4,230 in taxes, increasing the actual net cost of their gift. So don't sell the investment, give it directly to the charity, and we can help you through the Archdiocese do this. In estate planning, I like to use this analogy to explain insurance and why I use it when it's appropriate. So think of the ball as your money. The further you can throw or hit the ball out there, the more your beneficiaries or charities get. Insurance acts like a golf club, allowing you to get the ball out there much further. In speaking with John and Jill Gibber, they thought it would be a great idea to leave some of their money, their RSPs, to their children. Unless, of course, we could come up with a better idea. So let's look what would happen if the kids inherited $200,000 of RSPs when mom and dad are gone. Under option A, when you die, the $200,000 is added to your income in the year of death. In our example, Jill Gibber's estate would owe an extra $85,000 in income tax and the children would be left with the difference of $115,000. Under option B, we could give the $200,000 RSP over a 10-year period to the Archdiocese at $20,000 per year. They would give us a receipt which would lower the taxes we would pay. In our example, we would anticipate the tax credit of $8,693 for the full every year for the full 10 years. We would take that tax savings and then purchase an estate bond, which is a joint to die life insurance policy, joint last to die life insurance policy. An example I'm using here is a 10-year paid up policy through BMO that guarantees an initial death benefit of $184,000 and is projected to, by the time the end of the planet, 90 years old, to be worth about $469,000. Now you'll notice in option B, the government doesn't get any money. You took the $85,000 of social dollars, the money you would have paid in taxes, and you redirected it to give $200,000 to the church, $185,000 to as much as $469,000 to your children, tax-free and outside of your estate, simply by planning. There are lots of ways to give. We went through a couple different ways. We're all different. Some have more money, some have less. We work with everybody. A simple plan can be very effective. The Archdiocese has the Catholic Legacy Society, and this gives you a chance to let the Archdiocese know you want to help out. To join the Catholic Legacy Society, connect with Henrietta Lamb and she'll get you going, or go to their website and there's information on there. You can add the parish to your will or make them a beneficiary of your life insurance policy. Here's the wording you could use. And if you want to do this, just give us a call and we can help you get things exactly as you would like. Additional wording based on how you might want to use your gift. You might want to leave it up to the Archdiocese to decide the need, where the need is the strongest, or you could direct it very specifically to something that you feel needs the most support. Keep in mind, if you're changing your will, there will be a cost if you change your mind. However, if you are donating a life insurance policy, the beneficiary can be changed at no cost. Again, I'd be happy to help you with any of this. So remember, everybody needs a plan, and no plan is still a plan. I'd like to thank everybody for your time this evening, and I'll now pass it on back to Mike.
Okay, thanks, Joel. That was very informative. Thank you. Obviously, lots to unpack there for everyone. So continue again. I encourage you to reach out to Joe for a one-on-one, and if there's something specific there that really caught your attention that you'd like to perhaps drill down a little further on, and I know Joe would be happy to make the time to meet with you. You know, and I think it's important. He said everybody is different. Everybody's scenario is a little different. When you're younger, perhaps it's more about your resume, and as you get older, it's more about the legacy and the best sort of financial solutions. So thank you again, Joe. That was fantastic. So our next speaker, another expert in advanced care planning. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tao. Thank you for joining us, and I will hand it over.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not very technologically gifted, so please bear with me. So my name is Tao. I am a medical oncologist. And I practice at the BC Cancer Agency out in Abbotsford here as well. And so my specialty is in the treatment of breast cancer, melanoma, as well as head and neck cancer. Okay. So I am a Catholic, and my parish is St. Joseph in Port-Moody, but I also attend St. Anne in Abbotsford on a weekday. And so as a Catholic physician and as an oncologist, I'm sure you can understand that I deliver the bad news pretty much every day. So patients coming in, and oftentimes I have to tell them that they have stage 4 cancer and that treatment is often to improve the quality of life and try to prolong it as much for as long as I can, but ultimately people will die. And it's important as a Catholic to understand what is the church teaching regarding death, and in medicine. So the church recognized that it is perfectly acceptable to refuse heroic effort to keep a person alive, especially when it is the outcome, the risk totally outweigh any benefit. And then there's the other principle that the church also recognized is that sometimes people have reached the end when there's no further treatment, but they are suffering with pain, for example, pain and restlessness and having a hard time at the hours, the days before death comes. So it's perfectly acceptable to administer medication to a dying patient with the goal of alleviating the pain to make sure the patient don't suffer. But at the same time, I have to be extremely careful regarding the dosage that, that we don't kill the patients with it. It's just the goal is just to alleviate suffering and allowing death to come naturally. So those are the values that I hold and do with every consultations that I do with patients. I keep this in the back of my mind. Oftentimes, I bring up the subject of advanced care planning with patients, and people don't understand. A lot of times they say, well, I have the power of attorney, or I have a will made up already. Well, a will, as you've heard, is only effective after you die. Before you die, a will has no legal power or anything like that at all, okay? And a power of attorney mean that you designated somebody to take care of your financials, like who pays your bill, who manages your finances, et cetera, but it doesn't tell necessarily, it's not effective for people to, regarding medical decisions. So there is this booklet, this booklet called My Voice. It's a free book provided by the Ministry of Health. And it outlined all the steps, what's needed. So in advanced care planning and talking about with my patients, it's important for you to think about what are your values. In the event that suddenly you had a stroke and you can't talk anymore, like who do you want to make healthcare decisions for you? Do you want to be on a ventilator? Do you want to be on a life support machine? Do you want a CPR? Do you want a feeding tube? Like when is enough, right? And what is important to you? And would you accept or refuse life support? And do you want surgery? All of these decisions, you have to think about what's important to you, and it's important like who can make that decision for you. So in that advanced care booklet, My Voice, it has 2 sections that I want to highlight and talk to you about. Number 1 is section 7. It's a standard representation agreement. And it's basically name a person to make, section 9 here is that it allows your named person to take personal care decision and healthcare decision, including decision to accept or refuse life support or prolonging life supporting intervention for you. So it's very important for you to have this section 9 fill out. And for us, as medical practitioner, that's what we look at, okay? You don't need to go to a lawyer to have a stamp approved or anything like that. As long as this section is filled out, there's a witness on there, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, this is a power attorney kind of thing I was alluding to, equivalent. Section 7 is allowing a person to make routine financial decisions for you, personal care decisions, but it does not allow this person you name here to refuse life support or life prolonging interventions. Okay, if that is needed, then you should look at section 9. And then there's a different thing called advanced directive. You can state in advance, saying that No, I do not want to be resuscitated. No, I don't want to be on a life support machine. No, I will not accept surgery. I will not accept amputation of my leg. So it's very specific. It tells the medical professionals such as me what to do in an emergency where you can't speak for yourself. It's important for me to know what your values are so that those can be respected. Okay, and then enduring power of attorney, again, it's a talk about financial and legal decisions. So if in the unfortunate event, when you get admitted to the hospital these days, the most it is, I think, I don't know whether it's become law or not, but we are mandated to ask for what is the medical scope of treatment, which is the most form. And this is active in Fraser Health. Vancouver Coastal might have a different form, but basically it asks for the level of intervention, right? Occasionally, if you ever go to the hospital, you hear the word code blue. You will come, and our instinct is to start CPR, put a breathing tube down and put you on a life support machines and that kind of stuff to try to get life going again. So if that happened in a hospital, some people, a lot of time we don't succeed in bringing the patient back, but sometimes we do. And there's sometimes the unfortunate event that people have to be, in a vegetative state, and it's not acceptable for people. So that's why this form came about. And we ask everyone who get admitted to the hospital to fill out this form and to indicate on here what level of care that is acceptable to you. You have to understand that, by saying that I don't want any CPR or critical care, it doesn't mean that medical professional will not treat you. And that is the common fear that a lot of my patients have, is that they worry that if they said, no, do a DNR, then I will not do any more chemotherapy, that I will not do any treatment for their cancer. In fact, it's not true. Signing the DNR form doesn't mean that I'm going to stop giving you treatment. I will continue to do chemotherapy until the risk outweigh the benefit, okay? And if that's what you wanted to do. And it's ethically, in accordance with the church teaching, it is ethically permissible to forego CPR if the circumstance is that it would not be a benefit to an individual. So let's say, for example, you have terminal breast cancer and you had a heart attack and you become unconscious. So for us to do CPR to get your heart back to working again, but it doesn't change the status that you're going to end up dying from breast cancer anyway, right? So in certain situations, we end up prolonging misery if we do CPR. So anyhow, it's everybody's decision. You got to make it for yourself and see what's important for you. I want to talk about a bit of palliative care, hospice care, and MAID. Some people have a misunderstanding. Palliative care is a brand of medicine where the focus is to alleviate the symptom. And palliative care can be done at home. So we do have palliative care team that go to your home. It's basically nursing or nursing aid assistant to come in and help you with at home, provide nursing care at home, or it can be carried out at an extended care center, long-term care center. The goal again is just to alleviate symptom, give you pain medication if that's bothering you. And that difference with that is the hospice care. Hospice care is a place where it's reserved for people with imminent death. This is where we anticipate the death. Life expectancy is less than 6 months. And what is a hospice home? A hospice home is generally kind of like a home design environment, kind of like a home setting. There will be nurses there and they will be providing you with all the assistance you need. So you get to spend quality time with your family. and you don't have to, your family doesn't have to, do all the cooking, prepping, and caring for you in your dying days. So a hospice home is a great alternative to home death if you so choose. Unfortunately, over the past year or so, 18 months or so, it's also became law or requirement by the Ministry of Health that MAID, which stand for Medical Assistance in Dying, be provided at hospice home. Before that, MAID was not available at hospice home. You have to go to the hospital in order to have MAID, or you have to die in your own home in order for them to do MAID. Now they mandated that. So all the hospice home, don't be surprised, sometime MAID procedure is being done there. So what is MAID? MAID is Medical Assistant in Dying. It came into force in June 2016. They call it MAID, but really it's physician-assisted euthanasia. The law describes that you have to have certain condition and criteria before a physician's can give you the medications to give a patient a medication to end the patient's life, and basically to avoid prosecution for the physician. Catholic Church, of course, is absolutely opposed to MAID. And as a healthcare provider, they also are pressuring us to provide MAID as well, but I am still protected, by law for conscientious objection. So I don't provide MAID. So if you want that, that is provided as another doctor or ask the health authority, as I'm not involved in that. So basically, that's all I have to say. Like I said, again, just to summarize, enduring power of attorney, financial decision, but not healthcare decision. And it terminates when the person making the power of attorney dies. A will is how your estate is going to be distributed after, and effective only after you die. Okay. So think about the advance directive, your medical health decisions need, and what is important to you, and communicate that early with your doctors, and share it with your family doctor, your pastor, your caregivers, anybody. It make it easier for your family, basically, in the event that you can't speak for yourself anymore. And the other important thing I want to stress is that these, you can change your decision, you can change your mind. So it's not like you do it and it's fixed in stone. You can not ever change it again. So you can at least make a copy, change your mind next week. It's perfectly fine. Okay. That's it. Thank you for listening, and I'll be around. So if you have questions at the end, just let me know.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Tal. For someone who says they're not exactly tech savvy, you did a fantastic job there. So thank you so much. I think in the last few years, whether you're 2 years old or 100 years old, we're all in the tech world, and in the Zoom world, something happens every day. So great stuff. Thank you so much. I think, again, a lot to unpack there, and it's another great example of two fantastic resources to reach out to here with any questions or any advice in a really confidential manner. So thank you again. And speaking of that, we'll go right into our next round. Another expert, a good friend of mine, Peter Nopes. Thank you for joining us here. And I'll hand it over to you, my friend.
Great, thanks, Mike. I thought I'd add on to our prayer before I put my slides on. And the prayer I'd like to call our attention to is the Fatima Prayer, which is part of the Rosary. And the Fatima Prayer goes, "O my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those in most need of thy mercy." What I've often, when I pray the Rosary, I often found that the lead all souls to heaven always stood out for me. So my talk in the next few minutes is, how do we lead ourselves to a kind of a heavenly journey, a heavenly pilgrimage? So just to recap, I'm Peter Nopes, your Director of Catholic Cemeteries. I've been working for the diocese for approximately 9 years. I'm a parishioner of Holy Trinity, and I have 2 children. I'm also on the leadership team at the Archdiocese, which meets weekly, so I'm kind of connected to the Ministry and Outreach Office, as well as to the Office of Development with Mike and his team. I thought I'd start with a story. The name of my talk is Meaningful Funerals and Sacred Burial, and I'll speak to how what we offer in the Catholic tradition and sacraments and our social supports, how we're different and how we're different from mainstream alternatives out there. So I like to start with a story, and it's a story about Mary and my neighbor Joan. I moved here as a young man when I was 26 years old from Montreal to Vancouver, and I really didn't know anybody. And I befriended a neighbor who lived right across. Our balconies were right across from each other. And Mary was a 72-year-old retired school teacher. We got to know each other, and I would meet Mary I think it was every Tuesday or so. We would have tea. She was British, had a wicked sense of humor, and she became my best friend. So I think some of you have heard the play, Wednesdays with Maury. I had Tuesdays with Mary. Mary had a lung condition, and I ended up becoming her caregiver. She had one sister who lived in England, and so when she went into hospital a couple of times, I went in there and I was kind of her care advocate. So that's another thing I'd kind of recommend as part of Dr. Tal's talk, is that if you had to go in the hospital, who could help you with navigation kind of the hospital system. Mary went on. She became quite elderly and frail, and again, I kept up my friendship for her in terms of social supports and picking up food and doing some things of that nature, plus social support. Mary, when she was in her last years, she prepared a funeral plan. She prepared her sacred burial, and she had a will, and she had everything taken care of. She had an executor. And I remember sitting with her one time. She said, I am ready, Lord, take me anytime. So she had great peace and very little anxiety with the prospect of death and dying, which is what my hope is for our community. And to have that peace, you really need to have a look at and address the reality of our mortality, but also to understand what the church offers us. I'd like to compare that with a relationship I had with a neighbor who was also quite elderly and quite sickly in the last year of her life. And I used to get some groceries for her. She had an estranged relationship with her sons. She was no longer attending church. And sometimes we would also sit down and have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. And I'd often ask her, is there anything you'd like me to help you with? Would you like me to reconnect you with the church? Is there anything I can do around your will preparation and so on? And she always avoided the topic and changed the topic. When she went on and she did die, her sons didn't know what she wanted for her funeral. She did not have a will. Her house was actually stuck in probate for something like 18 months or 2 years. So it wasn't a great end of her life. And the main thing is she had great anxiety. I remember visiting her in the hospital, and she had this great anxiety about what's going to happen next, and just by almost a paralysis and avoidance of the topic. So again, my hope for you as a community and for our community is to take the time to learn what the church offers us and to be spiritually and practically prepared. So I'm just going to load my slides here because I have some content I'd like to share with you. Okay, we should be looking at a slide that says meaningful funerals and sacred burial. If it's not, someone please jump in and tell me. Okay, so the rough outline for my talk is talking about how funerals and sacred burial fit in with our journey, our sacramental journey within the church. Why a meaningful funeral is both healing and offers us hope. How sacred burial at a Catholic cemetery is different, and when I mean different than say a municipal cemetery or a corporate cemetery, which are the alternatives we have. Why preparation is an act of caring. Okay, so what we see here is this is our kind of our sacramental journey in the church. And often at our parish, we say the Reverence for Life prayer. And in the Reverence for Life prayer, if you remember that we revere life from conception till its natural end. So our ministry, like all ministries of the church, is a ministry of hope and a ministry of love and life. So we think about our sacramental journey. We have baptism, confirmation. Some of us will go into married life. Some of us will go into vocational life. And our ministry really fits in, for most part, in the later years of our life. I do like to mention that we have the sacrament of the sick, which is one of the 7 sacraments. And that is a sacrament available to us if we're sick, if we're aging, if we're going in for an operation. It's not just the sacrament of last rites. What the church offers us is the funeral rite. We have sacred burial, which I'll speak to in a moment. And then our ministry also looks into and takes care of grieving and bereavement ministry. So we help people after there has been a death in the family. I would like to speak to the context of death in a Christian context. We were created to last forever. So here is a beautiful piece of scripture. God did not make death, nor does he delight in the death of the living. For God created man for incorruption, and he made him in the image of his own eternity. So often it's difficult to talk about death and dying because it wasn't natural. It's not a natural thing for us. So, however, it takes courage. Let us keep in mind that we need to take courage in talking about this. I'd like to read another piece of scripture which comes from St. Paul. Do you know that all of us have been baptized into Christ Jesus? We're baptized into his death. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. So as followers of Christ, we will likely suffer. We may have some suffering in our later life. We will die, but we're living in hope for the resurrection. We're living in hope for this earthly pilgrimage to eternal life. So with that in mind, that gives us some comfort that what we have is certainly a destiny of hope, a destiny of hope. Here is a little bit of a slide. So along the bottom of this is kind of our earthly pilgrimage. We have our life, our living. We'll go through life and we may experience sickness at some point in our life, or certainly some of the aspects of aging with physical decline. We will die. We'll have earthly death or bodily death, and then there's an afterlife that we can look forward to. So if we look at this in the context of hope, so there's secular hope, which is, geez, I hope the pandemic is over with real soon. And then we look at the virtue of hope in we have faith, hope, and love as our 3 theological virtues. We are, as followers of Christ, we learn from his model. Christ died, resurrected, and is alive with us today. During aging and dying, we certainly have some supports during this time. So during aging, we have the sacrament of anointing, which I mentioned. We have reconciliation, Eucharist, viaticum. What's called viaticum, which means is Latin word for food for the journey. So when someone is nearing the end of their life, a priest can administer viaticum, which is a very small portion of the Eucharist, which is food for the journey. We offer our traditions and our community support. So that's hope during aging and dying. And then when there is a death, what do we offer? We have meaningful funerals. We have sacred burial. We have bereavement and aftercare. So what I'd like to propose to you is that when you combine these things together, we offer hope and a very positive vision for end of life. So right in the funeral liturgy, it says, life will change, not end. Life will change, not end. So essentially, we're born with a mortal body. When we're born, we have an immortal soul. We will go through life. We will experience earthly death. And in the Christian context, earthly death is a passage to eternal life, where we live in hope that the soul will reconnect with the body. So this is something to look forward to. And this is something, a beautiful vision. Alrighty, I'd like to just share with you some very specifics about the Catholic funeral. The Catholic funeral is a beautiful ritual that offers hope and healing. There are 3 main components to the ritual itself. There's the vigil or the wake, which is an acknowledgement of the loss of a loved one. So this is a social gathering, a community gathering. There's usually a brief prayer service with this. The main liturgical offering is the funeral mass. And then we have the final prayers at graveside, or the final interment prayers, which is like a final goodbye. It's kind of neat here that you see in the funeral mass picture here in the middle, that we come into this world in a baptismal pall and we leave the world in a baptismal pall. So it's kind of a nice circle of life thing that we experience. The Catholic funeral has three main purposes. First off, we thank God for the life of the person who just has passed. We ask God for the forgiveness that person's sins, and we ask God to accept and receive the person. So this is a beautiful thing. The funeral mass is a liturgy that is focused on the future and looking forward. We kind of juxtapose that, or compare it to what's generally offered now. We have cremate and celebration of life later. Celebration of life offers some psychological value and some comforts to the family, but it also is looking in the past. You know, this is the person's life, and it highlights some things with the person's life. So I do like to think of the funeral as a very important ritual, and we need to be careful, particularly in the pandemic, is over the last 2.5 years, we saw a lot of reduction in ritual. We saw a lot of things that were imposed where we were only allowed to have 10 people at a funeral or 10 people at the final interment. So I'd encourage us not to think about skipping of ritual. It provides both a very liturgical purpose and a psychological purpose. What I'd like to do now is just spend a minute on Dr. Wolfelt, as a psychologist that we have worked with in the past for educational work. And he's has developed a very beautiful model which talks about some of the things that a funeral does for us in terms of addressing our psychological needs. For instance, in the funeral does this as well. So we acknowledge the reality of the loss of a loved one. We recall key aspects of their life, what was important, their contribution to the community, their family, and so on. We offer support to the family and to the loved ones who have experienced this loss, and provide them with comfort. Then we express our sorrow, we express our grief. Funeral and the ritual brings the grief out into public bereavement. So that's what Dr. Wolfelt would say. We draw out the grief, which is an internal, and it comes out to an expression in a public form, which helps us to start the process of healing. Of course, we look for meaning. What was the meaning of this? And the transcendent is the final portion, which is union with God. We're praying for the union of the soul to be with our Lord. All right, so I'd like to just explain how some of the services are interconnected. So on the bottom circle there is Catholic Cemeteries as an example. We offer planning tools. Many of you downloaded a planner, which was free, so thank you for doing that. So we have planning tools. We offer sacred burial space. We offer the services that are related to the burial. So as an example, a grave, when there's a death, a grave has to be opened and then closed after the final interment prayers. And we do the memorialization related to the grave. Over to the right, we work with family independent funeral homes. The funeral home is a licensed body, and they're responsible for the preparation of the body, the transportation of the body. They take care of all the certificates and forms and obituaries. The funeral home is really the central coordinator, if you will, between us on scheduling, and also with the parish for the mass and the services. The parish is responsible for the liturgy, so they would conduct the vigil, the mass, and a priest would come out for the final interment prayers. The parish is also responsible for community prayer and support and volunteer support. So that gives you kind of the intertwine on interconnectedness of how we work together with some of these providers. A cemetery is a place of faith, hope, and remembrance. So if you think about it, we really are the bridge between the church on earth and the church in heaven. How are we also different? How is it different than a municipal cemetery? So there's 3 types of cemeteries out there. There are religious cemeteries, of which we're a religious cemetery. There are corporate cemeteries owned by primarily a large corporate, two main corporations in North America, and they do, you know, a very good service. And then there are municipal cemeteries run by local municipalities. So West Van is an example. Langley has a small cemetery, and the city of Burnaby, I believe, has a small one as well. So those are kind of the alternatives that are out there. How are we different? Well, we're owned and operated by the church. The burial grounds are blessed by an archbishop. We have a Catholic chapel on site. And the other thing I'd like to mention is that any proceeds over our costs stay back in the community to support ministries and outreach, and other ministries thrive. So those are some ways that we are different. The other reason that we're really quite different is that priests come and pray at the cemetery. And all of us in our Christian journey are called to pray for others. So we're called to pray for the souls in purgatory. And we pay particular attention to that during the month of Holy Souls. And I invite all of you, every November, we're called to come to a cemetery and pray for the souls, or come at any time. And we, in particular, we have we've been bringing back the Holy Souls Triduum. So there's Christmas Triduum, Easter Triduum, and the Hallowtide Triduum. So we have a candlelight vigil, we have All Souls Day and All Saints Day. So that's the Triduum that we pull together, that we have and commemorate in the month of November. So those are a little bit of a few things on how we are different. So that's how we're different. I just kind of covered that. Our main archdiocesan cemetery is the Gardens of Gethsemane, which is on 32nd Avenue in South Surrey. We also operate a historic cemetery called St. Peter's, and we support a couple of church cemeteries, one in Chilliwack, St. Mary's, and another one in Hope. So those are the main cemeteries that we have. And the word cemetery, by the way, comes from a Greek root to sleep. So if you listen to some of the readings that we have often on a Sunday, it talks about to sleep, to rest. It doesn't actually say to die, because we believe that the soul continues. So we don't say, you know, so that's where the root of the word cemetery comes from. So just on a practical nature, I'd just like to share what we offer in terms of options. So we have traditional plots. So this is casket burial in the ground. We have crypts, which are usually in a building. This is a mausoleum interior type crypt or an exterior type crypt. So that's casket burial in a wall, if you will. And the third type is cremation. So we offer interior cremation crypts, niches rather, I'm sorry. And what you're seeing there in that picture is a glass fronted niche. We have what's called stone front niche, which are usually on the exterior. For security reasons, we don't build those on the outside. And we also offer in-ground cremation. So there's 3 options on cremation. Just a few words about cremation. Since the Vatican II in the mid-60s, cremation is a viable means of disposition in the Catholic Church. What the Church does ask for is that the body, the full body, be present at the funeral mass, and that's because that's the way Christ died. It's the way many of the readings done, and the body is indeed the full symbol of death, of dying. So we ask that the body be present for that, with cremation occurring afterwards in final interment. The other thing to mention about cremation, cremated remains are the body just in another form. So just like we wouldn't separate the body, we are called not to separate the cremated remains, nor make jewelry from it, and so on. So our tradition is a little bit different than what we see in some of the secular world. So those are some of the reasons why. Okay, so we're coming near to the end. Preparation is an act of care, and we do encourage people to make what's called a pre-need plan. What often happens for us on a Monday morning at the Gardens of Gethsemane is we'll get phone calls. We have 2 types of phone calls. The first one is what's called an at-need call. My mom died on the weekend, what do I do? So there's been no planning. And so we guide the family on sourcing a funeral home, We help them start the process to select the burial space and to walk them through it. The second type of call we get is, my mom died on the weekend. We need to make, select an interment date. It's much smoother for the family. When there is a death in the family, there's something like 90 decisions to be made. And it can be a time of sorrow, it can be difficult. In the scenario of a couple, we recommend you make your pre-need plan because you can plan it together. So that, versus at need, there's one survivor who's making a number of decisions in a time that's difficult. Just to share with you a story, I often went back to Ontario with my wife for summer holidays, and we were sitting down with her in-laws having a cold beer one day, and I said, is there anything we can help you with in terms of planning? And they said, oh, we got everything made. We have a will. This is where the will is. And so let's go for a drive in the car. So we went down to the cemetery, and my in-laws had a headstone already picked out. They had 2 plots purchased. So all that had to be done at the time of death was, the date and year of death. So for us, when they died, it just allowed us to be fully present for the funeral. We didn't have to make any particular or arduous decisions, or because all the pre-planning had been done. As a matter of fact, my father-in-law, when we came back from visiting the cemetery, we were walking down the hallway. He opens the closet and he said, and he points out to a suit, and he said, "That's the suit I want to be buried in." So he was very comfortable with his destiny, and he had made their plans. And for us as a family members, it was we could just focus on being present at the final funeral. So pre-need plan is what we recommend. It lessens the burden on the spouse and children, helps you avoid emotional mistakes, and often we're in an environment of raising prices or rising land prices, which impact the cost of burial costs. So it's kind of a good thing to do. Alrighty, so how do you go about doing that? Discern your major choice, which is, do I want traditional burial or do I want cremation? So that's kind of, because whatever decision that is, other decisions relate to that. You would meet an advisor. We can give you a tour online, or it's preferable that you come to the gardens. We discuss your budget. We discuss whether you're looking at burial space for just yourself and your spouse, or yourself, or your broader family. When you do make your final plan, it's a contract. So like a will, it is a legal document. And when we meet with you, we ask you who the burial space is for and who has the rights to make decisions about that burial space. So those things become a legal document. And what I suggest to people is, what I've done at home is I have a folder. I have my will in there. I have done what Dr. Towell recommends. I've done a Schedule 9 advanced care planning, and I've also bought my burial space. So I've taken care of some of these things, and I've put all those documents in a will folder. And my wife knows where they are, who would be my executor, and my sister knows where those documents are, and she has copies of it, who is my backup executor. So those are things to just make sure you take care. Make sure you communicate with your family, because these things, they're okay to talk about. And actually, once you've had that conversation, like I did with my in-laws many years ago, it just provides some comfort. It provides some knowledge on what things we need to do next and where the documents are, so that we know what to do and to meet the wishes of the family. Okay, so one thing I'd like to highlight to you, we'll be sending you a link in the email afterwards. There's a page called Legacy/Legacy, which is on the Roman Catholic Cemeteries, the Archdiocese of Vancouver, rccav.org. So some of the content you've seen tonight is available on this website. Under the healthcare, as an example, Dr. Towell, just FYI, there's a link to both the BC Catholic Healthcare Association My Care Guide is in there, as well as the My Voice document. So there's a link in there, plus all of the content that I've covered is mostly in here. We've also included a couple of other things, such as Tell Your Story. There's what we have called Have the Talk of a Lifetime. So this is some resources to help stimulate a dialogue with the family, talking about, your planning, your funeral and your other plans. And so there's some good resources in here that are available to you. And when you're ready to make your plans, call us anytime at the gardens, or do take a view of the website, because there is a whole resource section there. And there are 7 videos that are really well done. On one in particular, I usually show it. It's due to time constraints tonight, I'm not showing it, but it's all about what the resurrection means for us. So there's some good video and resources in there. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation, and I'd like to say thank you for your time, and I'll pass it back to Mike. Mike, you're on mute.
Just missed the button there. Thank you for catching.
All right.
So, if you haven't had a chance to visit Gardens of Gethsemane, it's truly a beautiful ground. So I'd encourage you all to do that at any time of the year. And obviously, I think one of the keynotes Peter touched on is, no matter what part of our life, and pre-planning can simply eliminate some of the stress of our very busy lives. So that really struck a chord with us there, and I hope it did for you as well. So thank you everyone for your time tonight. We're just over an hour. I'd like to say all 3 of our speakers tonight provide us with an opportunity to open these doors to areas that previously we may not have known where to go, or who to talk to, or where to go even. So I hope that you feel comfort in the fact that all of these speakers, subscribe to our core Catholic values, and they all bring those values to the table, and that you now have email access, or perhaps a phone call to reach out directly and follow through. As Peter mentioned, there will be links and an email sent, so you'll have all that information at your side. And again, I'm the Director of Development at the Archdiocese. I have a wonderful team in our department, and we'd be happy to, put out the roadmap and point you in the right direction at any time. So feel free to come that way as well. So with that, I noticed we've had a few chats and some questions going on, and lots of them being answered. If you'd like to ask a question now to any of our speakers, and speakers that you could check the Q&A. There's some that are very directed A to B to you, so have a look at those, and we can conclude the night shortly if there's no further questions. So just checking the chat quickly. So I think, Peter, can you see the chat there?
You want me to look at Q&A or chat?
The Q&A.
Q&A, yes.
At the top of the list there. Would you like to touch on that, or is that something you'd like to sort of go one-on-one?
Sure. There's a question here about the whole of remains being present for some liturgy. If there has been a split of cremated remains, it's something to talk through with a pastor. What most pastors would say, it's best to, if that's been done and it is done, particularly out of lack of knowledge, to be able to have some type of service, or a prayer service, and to be pastoral. By the way, cremated remains can be present for the full funeral mass. That's a decision that was made just over a year ago. So although it's the preference of the church to have the body, the cremated remains can be done. So that was, I think, one of the questions here from a participant. Thank you. There's a question here, will we be sending out a list of Catholic lawyers? I think that can be covered with a link. And the other one I wanted to make mention of, can non-Catholics be buried in a Catholic cemetery? I meant to mention it. We bury baptized Christians. We do look for a Catholic connection. And if a baptized Catholic is buried to, Lutheran, or they're buried to an Anglican, or someone who's Jewish, that's fine. We try and keep families together. So I meant to mention that. That's usually a common question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. There are some questions in the chats pertaining to the costs of wills, etc. I think, Joe, maybe if you wanted to touch on, but I think it'd be pretty specific to each circumstance or how much might that process entail. Joe, did you want to touch on that quickly for us?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you're looking at a will, you know, if you budget somewhere probably in the neighborhood of $800 to $1,000 for a couple to get their wills done. If you decide to make your will more complicated, obviously, the more complicated wills can get more expensive. But I would encourage you to, again, think about you're able to appoint an executor as opposed to perhaps having the government administer your estate. And if I look at $50,000 to the government to administer my estate versus maybe, you know, spend $1,000, get a lawyer or get a notary to do up your will for you and appoint your son or daughter to be your executor, and they can put that $50,000 in their pocket instead of the government. So.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Joe. Closing thoughts from our panels and speakers then tonight. I think we've covered most of the chats and questions. And again, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And please, I hope you now feel really comfortable to reach out to any one of us to explore any of these topics further. So, Dr. Tao, Peter, Joe, thank you all. Any last thoughts, please feel free to add now, and we'll call it an evening.
I just want to, there's questions in the chat I just want to address about donating the body to for science or organ donations. So organ donations can only be done when the patient is still alive, meaning patients on life support, and we have to match people. So that's perfectly fine. Just let your doctor know and make it known on the advanced directive or your medical decisions. When we know that, then it's easily accessible. Regarding donating your body to science. So basically, I went through medical school here. We learn from cadavers. We show great respect to the cadavers. They are our teachers. So we revere, we respect the body. After we finish learning, the school hosts a non-denomination kind of gratitude acknowledgement, and then the body will be returned to the family for cremation, or the cremated remain will be returned to the family for burial. So contact UBC Medical School. Look on the website, they have information on there as well too.
Excellent, thank you.
Mike, just building on that. So Catholic social teaching is that by donating your organs or a body for science is that it's helping life. So it comes back to our life belief that it's a good thing and it's encouraged to help because, you know, medical students making new discoveries on medicines and procedures is a good thing to prolong life to our position of life.
Excellent, thank you, Peter. And Joe and Peter, there's two last questions there regarding a lawyer or a notary, and the second one being a notary public need to photocopy a driver's license. You want to touch on that really quickly? It might help a few of the other participants as well.
Sure, absolutely. So a lawyer, typically you would use a lawyer if you're going to be needing legal advice. Okay, because a lawyer provides the legal advice. A notary is a notary. While they will help direct you, that typically we go to a lawyer for doing a will. The one piece that a lawyer can do, which a notary cannot, is a trust. And so if you are wanting to have a bit of direction on how your assets are handled, perhaps you're leaving them to children, or you're leaving them to people that need guidance, and you want to use a trust, that can only be done through a lawyer. I do see here a question as well about does the notary public need to photocopy your driver's license and keep a copy? And that really comes into making sure that they know who you are. and that the document that they're creating has been properly vetted. I would have, for my will and stuff, my lawyer has a copy of my driver's license, and I have no problem with that. But yeah, so if they're requesting it, you can always ask them for their explanation of why they might need it. But yeah, but both are good. Like a notary, there's nothing wrong with it if you have a simple situation to use a notary.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that explanation. Final thoughts then, Peter, Dr. Tao?
Yeah, I often say to people as a kind of a final thought is, it can be overwhelming sometimes if you haven't, if you're looking at everything and you're thinking, oh, wow, this is a lot of stuff. So just take stuff in baby steps, like we've had people come to our webinars like this, and, I've seen them come back the next year or 6 months later, which is great. They say, okay, well, I had to take care of my will. Now I got that done. Now I'm ready for the next step. What's that? Okay, my healthcare plan. Okay, I'll do that. And, so take things in steps, and you'll feel good. And the other final thought I had for people is, you think about an estate is kind of like a pie with different slices. So the will is one slice, the advanced health plan is another slice, and then keep in mind your funeral and your burial space as other slices in that pie. And then you kind of get your pie all done and in place. And then it's a good feeling to have those things in place. It provides comfort to many that I've worked with over the years that have done those things. And, and talk to your family about it. That's the key thing, I think. Yeah. Let those know where the documents are and what your decisions have been, and it's smoother for everybody. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone, on behalf of all of us in the panel and the Archdiocese. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us, and please feel free to reach out at any point. So thank you, and have a great night, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
All right. Take care.